Everybody, Andy here again, out in the wonderful Sussex countryside. A glorious day. I said the other week that I think it was the last day of summer. I think it's getting close. But a lovely walk, and one of my favourite areas of it, Winchelsea and Icklesham, which I've done several walks in before, but not going to go on about that. But I recorded an AudioBoo about 20 odd minutes ago, part way through the walk, and that reminded me actually of a video I wanted to make, because I listened to an AudioBoo by Gary, Anakin 1814, the other day, and it was all about John Lennon and the fact that it would have been his 70th birthday. I believe it was last Saturday. Today is the Monday. And in it, Gary said that John Lennon obviously was 40 when he died, and it seems 30 years ago. It seems so long. But the other interesting point about it was the fact that Gary is 40 this year himself. And all these sort of coincidences and all the things that are going on, I've just literally just walked past one of the properties that Paul McCartney owns in this particular area, the Windmill, which is like a recording studio come rehearsal room for him. And I've walked past it before, because you literally walk right past it on this particular walk. And sometimes I've heard music coming from there, and the windows have been open, and it makes you wonder whether he's in there or all that. But so that's one of those sort of coincidences. But the other point that it made me think of was something a few years ago. I've been talking a lot about Hastings Pier, the fact that it's burnt down and all this type of thing. So that's made me reminisce in that respect. One of the people I saw on Hastings Pier, and one of the last real gigs that they had on Hastings Pier, was Joe Strummer and his band the Mascaleros, and that was in November of 2002. And by a nasty coincidence, that was one of the last ever gigs that Joe Strummer actually played. I think he did literally a couple more gigs after that, and he died in December of 2002. And he died at the age of 50. And at that particular time, I was 44 years old. And I remember thinking, a bit along the lines of what Gary said, although he never said this, was that the amount that he'd done in those 50 years, the same as what you think of the legacy that John Lennon has left, those 40 years that he spent on this planet. You think of what he did in those 40 years, and then you start to think about what did you do? Like Gary's probably thinking, what have I done? I'm nearly 40. What have I achieved? Anything like John Lennon has? We all have our own way, our own achievements are different, obviously. But that's what made me think about it when Joe Strummer died, and I remember thinking, if I was 50 and I'd lived the life that he'd led, would I be happy to die at that particular age? It sounds morbid, and okay, obviously you don't want anyone to die, you don't want to die yourself, but it's those milestones in your life, 40, 50, 30 even, you get a bit older, 60, whatever it might be, you get to retirement age, and you think, what have I achieved in my life? And then you hear about these people who died at an early age for whatever reason. John Lennon at 40, Joe Strummer at 50, and you think, I'm now 52, and I'm thinking, what have I achieved in my life? As it happens, since that 2002 date, I've actually achieved a fair amount in my life, and I think I've done quite well. But you know, it's the point I was going to make was the fact that I was thinking, it's quite serious sort of considerations going through my head, because I held and still do hold Joe Strummer up to great regard, as people do with John Lennon. Yes, I've got nothing against John Lennon either, but I was thinking, you know, if I'd achieved everything that Joe Strummer had done, with the Clash, with all the music that he'd done since, the way that he was held in high regard, everything that he'd achieved, and you don't always hear about all of it until after the person's died, do you? Would I be happy? How would he have felt if he'd have known that he was going to die at the age of 50? He might have thought, actually, I haven't done too bad. I've actually left a pretty good legacy. I've lived a pretty good life. And if your life does come to an end, and hopefully it won't, but if it does come to an end at an earlier age than what you'd originally planned, at least you can look back and you think, yeah, I've done all right. I've spent my time on this planet fairly wisely. And maybe that's what sort of triggered me a little bit, was that thought there back in 2002 when I was 44. As I said, I've achieved more since then. Maybe that's one of the reasons, because subconsciously it made me think, Andy, you haven't really done a great deal with your life. Yes, great marriage, 2 lovely kids and all that sort of stuff, but it's all those other bits and they're important, don't get me wrong, they're very important, but it's other stuff that I've done since which I'm equally as proud of, and things that I'm doing now. So I don't think I've done too bad, but I wonder about you. I wonder if that's the sort of thing that makes you think, when someone who you consider to be too young, and you forget how old they are, and you think, John Lennon was only 40, I'm 12 years past that, and he was 40 when he died. Joe Strummer was 50, I'm older than that now. It enough make you think. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I'd love to hear your thoughts and comments on this and your feelings, how you feel about it, and maybe what achievements you've achieved and whether you're happy with what you've done. And maybe you're thinking now, after listening about all these people, you think, well, actually, maybe I ought to get out there and stretch myself a little bit and have a go at something and make myself proud of myself, because it's nice to other people to be proud of you, but it's also good to have a bit of self-pride as well. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for your time. I'll speak to you again soon. Goodbye.